Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Maggie Key, who's an executive coach and a workplace mediator. First off the bat, Maggie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
All right. And Maggie's joining us from Austin, Texas. She's a former Chief Customer Officer and founder of MiraVous, which actually means look at you. I can't wait to delve into that a little deeper. She's an executive coaching business, over 20 years of leadership experience in diverse industries. So look, without further ado, I'm going to go with our pattern break question. And the pattern break question today is, if you were an Olympian, what would you be an Olympian at?
That is such a hard question.
I know. I know. The podcast is hard. You knew that coming into this.
Well, I don't know. I have a lot of ideas. I'd say that I watched sprinting in the last Olympics, and seeing the 100-meter dash was so exciting to me, and seeing the different participants as they won and the energy behind that. I just kind of wanted to be a part of that excitement. And I ran the 400-meter dash in high school, and it was long and painful. So I'm looking at the 100-meter dash thinking that is easier in terms of short, and it can be done. So maybe taking the easy way out is maybe part of my path there.
Yeah, I love it. And the 10-second sprint. Now, they say that people today have an attention span of, very short, the length of a song. It takes 7 seconds to form a first impression. So putting your leadership cap on, how important is it for executive presence? Like, do you coach your executives on being a shadow leader, the impact that they can have from that initial meeting and throughout the course of their leadership?
So maybe giving you a couple of examples. I have a CEO that I'm coaching, and he just started with his new company a couple of weeks ago. And we talked about assessing his leaders immediately. So what's important to you with a leader? Do I like them? Do I want to work with them? Are they hitting their metrics? Are they a good culture fit? Or do they get along with their peers? Are they leading their team, et cetera? I feel like it's important in that first week. Just score yellow, green, red before you start talking yourself into, well, it's the CRO and he hits his numbers and he's not the nicest guy, but he hits the metrics. Or somebody that's different than me. I've decided now that they're challenging me more than I want, and I don't want them to be around. So I think that quick piece, your intuition sometimes can be the best. And so take that as a starting point, and then check in, and then start gathering information before you make any rash decisions, but come back to that initial piece before the rest takes over.
Well, two things I love about what you've said already. Just sometimes self-reflection around red, orange, green. That's a great little tip straight off the bat. And my listeners, please notice that she actually answered that question with about 10 follow-up questions, reflection questions. So I already am pretty excited about effective coaching skills from that perspective. So let's talk about your background. I know that you worked for Salesforce, and you're delivering a fireside chat next week about women in business and some of the challenges that they face. Let's go there next. What are your thoughts?
Well, you hear a lot about imposter syndrome. I think it's a phrase that's been a bit overused, and we think that it's exclusive to women, which it isn't. I'd say probably 70% of my clients are executive men. And I'd say part of that is just because there are more men in the workplace. And I do have a direct style that's a good fit for a lot of men. but it's not exclusive to women. Digging into what is that thing that is keeping you from being your best. One thing that I found a bit of a pattern, and I think you see this with men and women, but women who are high achievers in sports, they're high achievers in school, and they hit a number or a metric or a win. Then they get into the workforce and want that same paradigm to exist. And it's just not the way of the world once you get to a certain point. So you can hit your measures, but if you aren't developing your soft skills, if you aren't helping your boss be more successful, if you aren't helping the people on your team be more successful, things start to fall apart a bit. I think for women, really taking the time to stop and think and realign, what are my values? What am I good at? What else might be happening here other than being a victim of a bad boss, a bad company, whatever that is? I think it's really important because we can get in this track of, corporate isn't fair to women. And I think, let's just face it, there are some things that still exist that are disadvantages. But if you put yourself in that position to only see it that way, you create what you look at. I drive a fast car. I took a road racing class, and the professional driver talked about you go where you look. And so when you look at the wall, you will hit the wall. So you look ahead. And the same thing for women. Look ahead. What do you want? What are your goals instead of the obstacles? What do you see? And don't let those barriers, those imaginary barriers, get in the way of your success. So yeah, I think there's just a track that we can get in that limits us. And sometimes in these women's networks, becomes this groupthink around that, and there's a bit of a danger. I personally, as I was progressing through my own career, I didn't always participate in those kinds of networks because I thought, well, once you define yourself as different, you might create that for yourself. So how do you get smart about that and create an advantage around your difference instead of making that a negative?
Create an advantage around your difference. I love that. MiraVous, talk to me about the name of your company. So I think that leads in nicely to what we were just talking about. Why did you call it that?
Well, as an entrepreneur, you go through this phase of like, don't overthink the name of your company. If you ever want to sell, maybe your name isn't the best. So I love creativity, and I started thinking, well, what can I name my business? And what is authentic to me? And I'd say the sort of my superpower, or what I've always been known for in and outside of work, is being authentic and really revealing the truth. And Mira is Spanish for look at you. And my husband and I are permanent residents of Chile. So I loved the Spanish piece of that. And then Vous, my husband speaks French. And so he came up with a Vous piece because the full Spanish version was taken. And I just have loved, it's sort of, if you don't know it, it's sort of a hidden meaning, but I think it really speaks to my approach, which is, let's start with you. All you can control is you. And so I know when I was getting coached, I wanted to look at somebody else. Was it my boss? What else might be at play that I couldn't control? And it wasn't until I started doing the real work around me. What was I good at? What was getting in the way? What can I focus on? That I really made the biggest shift. It's a little scary, and I think that's scary for my clients as well sometimes. But that is my goal, is to really look at you first, and that put the power with you, control your destiny, and then we can work from there.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that backstory. It's amazing how many times I'm running some leader as coach workshops, and when we get to the coaching piece, these leaders sit down to get coached, and they say, right, I want to fix my subordinate, or I want to fix this person because they're not, there's no urgency, or I need to, this person needs to meet their deadline. I want to get coached on how to change that person. Whereas, I'm a big fan of acronyms. I love your own it. Could you share with our audience, because that really does relate back to focusing on yourself and owning it yourself for this keynote you've got coming up. What does it stand for?
Yeah. So when I was approached about this keynote or a fireside chat, it was, what is important to women? And like I said earlier, I think women can get lost in, what I control, and they really have lost their power. And I'll tell you, when I coach a woman and I see this conversation around my boss was bad, or, something that's beyond their control, and there's some magic to the words, questions around, do you want your power back? How do you want your power back? What would it look like if you had your power back? The words around power are so important for women, because I think a lot of women, and I fell into this, feel like we've lost our power and someone took it from us, and no one takes it from you. You give it away. So own is openness, and that is being adaptable. I went through 5 different career focus areas. I was always looking for, opportunities. Being very open-minded about that helped me to achieve customer officer role. So be open to feedback and what are your strengths, and just listen. It's not a perfect path. You may set out to think you're going to be, something, and along the way you get, technology changes, or you meet a certain person. It's actually a better fit for you, just like my transition to coaching. It's just a better fit for me in the end. So being open to change and being adaptable. And the W is what matters. So in the context of your life, what are your priorities? What really matters? And you can't have 10, and you can't even have 5 in a given day. So I have my top values are 5. I work with my clients to determine their 5. And literally for me every day, I pick 2 or 3 that are my focus for that day. So that is what matters to me for that day. In the context of work, what matters to your boss? How are you measured? A lot of people can't tell you that. So you're not doing well. You and your boss aren't getting along. Something's happening. How are you measured? I don't really know. My boss hasn't told me that. Have you asked? Well, no, I'm afraid to ask. Well, you got to ask. You got to own it. So understand what matters to whoever's you're paying your paycheck, what matters to you, the priorities, and then setting your life and your day according to that. And then the third N for own it is networking. And I kind of missed the memo on this one. I used to say, and I maybe still say sometimes, I don't have lunch with people I don't like. And so I was an achiever. I had, the good grades, just like I said before, and I was good at sports and other things. And I showed up to work and I just worked hard. And that worked to a certain point. I said, I'm not networking. I don't need to do all this stuff. I've got to get busy, and I've got to hit my measures. And when you get to about VP, the landscape just changes. You get to the top of that mountain and you look over and you're like, what is that? It is something. The valley, which you're going to hit, looks a lot different than the one behind you. And so being intentional in networking is important for owning your path. I think a lot of people go to a networking lunch, or they go to whatever it is. There's networking opportunities in front of you, and they just show up. So you put on your favorite outfit, you meet a few people, you do the where are you from, what do you do? That's not networking. You've got to talk about, here's my value. This is the reason I'm here. If it is to expand your business, you got to be crisp about your value statement. If you are there because you want a new job, you got to be crisp about what that is, because when that person is in an elevator with your ideal new boss, and that ideal boss asks, so do you know anybody who has XYZ? If you haven't messaged those things, they get off the elevator, there went the opportunity. So if you want, I want to be a head of engineering. By this time, I want to work in this kind of industry, in this city, doing this kind of thing. Say that. There's no harm. You're not going to lose anything by saying that. Then if that opportunity presents itself, you've got that in front of you. And I can tell you for my business, this has been a game changer for me, is networking effectively. And I think women tend to feel embarrassed about it, feels like bragging. So you want to hide it. Well, you're having the conversation anyway. And instead of rambling on about things that maybe don't matter, get crisp and ask lots of questions and be curious about the other person, and find out about them, because let's face it, people like talking about themselves more than hearing about you, but get curious and really take advantage of networking.
I always say we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And yeah, I think also tomorrow I'm rocking up at a manufacturing trade show. Now, I've never been to a manufacturing trade show before. There's 80 exhibitors, and there's a little bit of apprehension there. I'm like, well, what am I doing there? Well, I know why I'm doing there, because my clients gravitating towards me are in manufacturing and construction right now. But I want to also share that even though I've got this apprehension around going, I've scripted out my curious questions, and I've scripted out some things, even though I'm a speaker and I've been speaking for years, that are going to help me tomorrow.
That's amazing.
I really highly recommend that to all those listeners out there, and that will help with your networking for sure. Which leads me into Workplace Mediator. So we've never had a Workplace Mediator coach on before, and I know that about 13 years ago you jumped into this space, and you talk about the importance of coaching each individual first and then bringing them together. And it reminds me of a quote from one of our previous podcast coaches. She said that friction is inevitable and conflict isn't. So with that in mind, talk me through this process that you go through, and what are some of the keys to bringing people together, to finding common ground, especially in today's society. What's your secret, Maggie? What's your secret sauce?
Oh my goodness. Well, I love it. Number one. So I just thrive in, and I'll say conflict. I think it's an interesting quote. If you follow Patrick Lencioni, he has a point of view about conflict, that it's necessary. I'd say if it gets disrespectful and it's unproductive, that is a thing that shouldn't exist. The conflict itself, getting spicy and bringing up things that are uncomfortable, I believe helps you move forward. Most people don't know how to have that conversation productively. So we're not trained that way. Most of executives, I find, are conflict averse or conversation averse, harmony orientation, and sometimes inauthentically. So I think it's actually kind of a lack of tolerance. But the process is you have two people that have lost their way in understanding the value of the other person and have developed an intolerance for somebody who reminds them of themselves in some ways and is different from themselves. And so I find that these individuals, and we all do it to some extent, have decided that our way is the right way. And we start constructing a world that's unproductive towards other people that don't fit. And so when you have 2 executives that the company wants to keep, and it could be 2 board members, it could be a CEO and their COO, or 2 peers. When you want to keep those people, you have to get back to what makes you, you, and what makes the other person them, and how can you complement each other and understand what do you agree on? What's the commonality, benefit of the doubt? How do we leverage each other's skills and strengths. So that, for me, if they are going to work together for a long period of time, I could get them in a room in a day and I could get them to work out that thing like a divorce mediation. So you can have that event. But if they are going to be successful moving forward, if they haven't understood their part in it and why the other person's kind of driving them nuts, they're just going to find this again and they might just harbor it, especially if they've gotten in trouble. They're not going to, it's going to be there. They're just going to contain it. So the work I do separately with the two individuals is start to coach them. What are your strengths? What are your values? What are your saboteurs? Let's talk about you first. What's your part? Because there's typically a victim and villain. And let's talk about your story. And it's the first time you've had this. It's usually not the first time you've been in this situation. So really helping them understand what they can control and just kind of getting joyful and like, hey, here's what I'm good at. And here's how I could turn up the volume and turn down the volume on my strengths. And then bringing them, the two people together in a fun way to look at like, hey, I'm going to show you why you drive each other a little crazy. And look at this. You both are low on execution. So you're both pointing to each other. You want the other person to do it. And neither of you are great at this. So you probably need a third person in the mix to do the execution pieces because neither of one of you have joy in it. And then so that you might be alike in a difference. You might be alike in a common area. So let's say influence. You both have high command and self-assurance and woo. And so there's only room for one of you in the room, you think. And so just like, wow, that's why we kind of don't get along sometimes because I want to be center stage. And so just helping the two people get back to seeing themselves as a human and the other person is a human. And it's really amazing what can happen in a very short period of time, simply that piece. Then I observe. We talk about some questions. So I'll have them ask a question. What's one thing you like from this person? And I'll tell you, at least half the time, the thing they want from the other person is the thing they're not giving. I want you to trust me. But everything they're talking about is non-trust. So I am a mirror, a little bit of that. I'm actually hearing a little bit of I'm hearing this word that sounds like a lack of trust. Is it fair, Bob, that maybe you're not trusting Joe? Well, or, some how and what questions. So you're not overly leading, but really helping them see that sometimes they are really frustrated with their own approach and they're maybe putting that on the other person.
That's a skill. And I know that you believe that a great coach, active listening skills are something that we must have to be a great coach. So I'll ask you now in 1 to a maximum of 3 words, what do you think makes a great coach?
I have so many words, but I'm going to apply some discipline. I'd say the one that comes to mind, and I think it's the hub, and there are a lot of words that would go around it, is presence. And I say that because it's what I practice. When I made the shift to be a coach, what I realized is when I thought I was coaching, sometimes I was coaxing, sometimes I was consulting, sometimes I was, making my grocery list, or really getting ahead. And so really sitting in that moment and there is zero else happening. You're not forward, you're not back, you are 100% in that moment. Then that frees up curiosity and adaptability and truth tellers. So those are some other words. I saw this over the weekend as it relates to sports. So I took a kickboxing class for the first time. I don't know if I look like I was kickboxing, but I will tell you that's the class I signed up for. And the coach or trainer was so distracted in being a character and what he was going to do next, that I didn't even really understand the technique. I was hurting my hand. I didn't know where to hit on the gloves. I kind of started figuring it out over time, but I really could have injured myself. So he was not present. He was somewhere else. I don't know that I'd go back because he didn't see me. Now, the two other women, he had assumed that they said that they had done kickboxing before. So he just made some assumptions. Well, that must mean X, Y, Z. And I'm a very fit person, so he probably made some assumptions about me until he started seeing me attempt to do this, maybe. But it was such a great reminder to me because I can get in that trap too. Starting to an email comes up or something happens, or I really starting to fix that. I think for coaches, sitting in that moment and really observing, you're watching, you're hearing, and it's energetic. What's the energy? And that's when I get into the great place with workplace mediation. It's something's not right. There's something else happening, and that's where the good questions come.
And you practice meditation, you were saying off air. Do you think that helps with presence?
Oh my gosh, it's a game changer. I've been meditating for over 15 years, and it's been quite a journey. I spend 30 to 45 minutes every day. I align my day to my values. I pray or wish good things for a set of people. And the first question I have for myself every day is, how do you feel? Some days grumpy, some days happy, some days whatever that is. What I know is if I don't get clear about that, I'm going to take it to my coaching and they will see it. There's no fooling them. So you can have that day, but having that centering, just go, here's where I am today, and being okay with that you're enough is so important so that the space is left for your client. You're not trying to fix you in that session, which I think can happen otherwise. So yeah, it's been a game changer for me.
And you also said off air, knowing my background as a former tennis coach, that, you know, I know that we've sort of gone from what makes a great coach, equally what doesn't make a great coach. And your experience again of saying, yeah, I used to play tennis, but you know, how a bad experience can then shift and then you end up not playing tennis. What just could you just briefly share, you know, why that was?
Sure. First I'd say we're not for everybody. And this has been a tough thing, I think, especially when you're a new coach, you just want to help and you want to get business. And I found I could do more harm than good sometimes if I'm not the right fit. I'm very direct, and that's not for everybody. So I had a coach, tennis coach, in a semester in college, and I really wanted to play. I knew my eye-hand coordination with a racket was going to be limited, but I thought I would enjoy it. And she was just unpleasant. She was kind of mean, I'll have to say, and that typically doesn't impact me. But she didn't enjoy her job, and it was a job, and she was very strict about it, and I just really wasn't very good. I quit the class. So I could have been a decent tennis player, let's say. I don't know, but I never wanted to play again. So I think for a coach, don't try to be the hero. You're not for everybody. And if you don't have joy in this thing, do something else, because it's our impact and ability to change the trajectory of somebody's mindset and confidence. We all hear these stories, and I'm sure I have a little bit of that too, where somebody wasn't the right fit, and it really took a person down a path that wasn't productive.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And you also mentioned that she was impatient. So if it is just a job, it's almost, you can see why impatience comes up as well, because you're just trying to get through the hour or the half hour or whatever it might be. So, and of course, just remembering everybody in my book, when I researched over 500 of the world's leading coaches, asked them in 1 to a maximum of 3 words, what makes a great coach? Passion was number 1. Which you talk about, the joy, the passion, the energy. People can feel that. You You can't fake that. So I know a lot of my listeners, you're very passionate about coaching, and I appreciate everybody's feedback. As we know, it is a labor of love that I present this podcast to you, and I'm enjoying this conversation so much, Maggie. Maggie Key, I love that. You've got so many different keys and the secrets to so many different things. So therefore, without further ado, tell me, what disruptive coaching idea do you have that will change the landscape of how we coach in 2030?
Well, AI is a popular topic, so I'm going to go there, even though I tend to not do things everybody else does. It kind of follows some of what I've spoken about earlier. We're good for some people and not for other people. I believe that if we had better data around coaches around the world, what we're good at, our niche, where we get joy, paired with people, and what frequency do they want to be coached? What's the problem they're trying to solve? What's their budget? What are their blind spots? What is their history? I think it could be this beautiful way of matchmaking that avoids trial and error. And I don't want to say democratizes it, I don't want to get too much into that sort of life is fair, but I do think, or I know, there are some wonderful coaches that can't afford marketing, that are stuck in a pocket of the world, that have an amazing gift to give, and they can't give it because no one knows they're there. What an amazing thing it would be to use technology to surface that person and their desire and their talent to somebody maybe across the world where they're this magical fit and it changes their life.
That's awesome. I really appreciate that idea. And the one thing AI can't teach when you're mediating, I love what you said earlier, how you pick up on words and you reflect those words back to potentially the people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
A robot can never do that.
Right.
And it can't ever be curious. So as direct as you are, it's come up now a couple of times in your style, how do you stop yourself from sometimes wanting to tell people to put their big girl or big boy pants on and suck it up?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And or do you do that?
I do it.
Okay. All right. Because when you said you're not for everyone, again, it leads into we aren't for everyone. We're not everyone's cup of tea. My energy is not everybody's cup of tea. I get that. But yet, talk to me about the fine balance that we live between being direct and we want to be direct, but we know that they know the answer. What are your thoughts?
I think clarity is kindness. So if you're direct and rude, if you're direct and hurtful, you've lost the spirit of that. There is something about my communication with my clients that allows me to say it clearly, not a lot of fluff, and they know I care about them, so it's with love. If I dance around it, it's not benefiting either one of us. And I can throw it out as a question. I'm hearing this thing. Did I get that right? Is so important. Hey, would you mind if I reflect something back to you? You can ask permission. So you have to read the room. Not everybody wants it delivered in the same way. But I think as a coach, if you aren't authentic and a truth teller, they've got friends. They don't need another friend. This isn't a friendship. This is an accountability partner that is helping you grow in a way that you can't get somewhere else. And I think that comes with truth and directness. Just like coaching your team, they can take the truth, but be respectful. But get in and out, say it quick, don't belabor, don't make judgments about the person, but being direct is kind.
And I think no matter what generation you are, continuously giving feedback, asking curious questions is the way of the future versus the 360 annual review.
Oh, terrible.
Yep, terrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're on the same page there. Well, I really do think that we have had the opportunity to hold the mirror up to ourselves. We need to own it. you're a very powerful lady, which and coach, and I love these conversations. Honestly, I really do, with clarity and kindness, aligning our values with strength so that we can meditate on what's important to us today with data and openness, what matters most in the context of our life, and get out there, everyone, and make sure you network. Thank you, Maggie Key, for being on the Coaching Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a joy.
I love that. Joy, passion, everybody, thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy